Brigandine looks awesome. Especially Shad. When he's wearing his brigandine, it's really hard not to believe whatever he says. In fact, I think that's the main reason I watch all of his videos, is just because I love seeing this stuff.
I ought to try that. Machiculations, y'all.
I can't believe what a garbage weapon the pistol is. And you see them so much in movies that you're wondering why they're always there. You can't hit anything with them, they're too short. In fact, if I had to choose between taking my rifle, cutting it in half longitudinally so as to preserve the length, then I would take that rifle cut in half over the pistol every time. Anyone who wants to ever use a pistol under any circumstance is a complete. Well, I mean, you can do it if you like it. You can imagine that you're Clint Eastwood or, whatever. But let's just say rifle, cutting in half, you get two of them, way better.
Dude, that's machiculated up.
So, one of the more ridiculous myths, or I guess statements about the nunchaku, is that it's such a bad weapon that if you had it, you'd be better off cutting it in half and using the two sticks. I mean, obviously, if we see what that looks like, you're going to end up with one of these things, which if it's tapered, you choose, well, do you hold it by the big end where it's a little bit easier to retain. You hold it by this one so you can get more energy at the end. But regardless, you end up with this problem where, first off, the point at which it's pivoting is close to around here. So you've got very little length to work with to generate speed. And then also you're limited by this wrist joint, which is really hard to get moving particularly fast because there are so many different pieces in there working together. So getting a lot of speed over a short distance like this is really hard to do, no matter how you're trying to swing it. And obviously with an nunchaku, you've just got so much more power that you can generate with a strike. Let's just see what that looks like really quickly, the difference in the speed I can get. Okay, that's with the whole nunchaku. And then here's with the half. I mean, there's just really no way. I mean, you can try using this wrist strength, but if you're holding this rigid, that makes it even harder to get any speed into the end. So any advantage you're hoping for by being able to hold it rigid is negated by not being able to generate speed. We can say, well, it's convenient because now I can head straight forward like this to thrust normally, but I mean, that's not an issue with the nunchaku either. Either holding the other end, like this, but I mean, I get to have this over that. I got two options as opposed to just one. So on a one-for-one basis, the nunchaku, both in terms of power and versatility, comes out ahead of this. But is there a way we can fix this? Is this such a stupid weapon that no one would want to use it ever? Well, what should we do to fix it? Well, there's a couple of things. One of them that I mentioned is because this is somewhat difficult to retain. If someone grabs onto it, they have a better grip than I do. So actually, if I'm focusing more on thrusting instead of swinging, I need some way to retain this better. One of the ways could be making it a little bit shorter so that there's less purchase. I could try holding it maybe in the middle to make both of the ends, but they're still, I mean, it's not It's like, I don't know, like a giant Kubaton. I can grip it comfortably, so I mean, it works like that well, but this extra length isn't making it any more effective. I could have it be shorter and still get the same versatility out of this. The other thing I can do is try fixing this problem of the wrist and having trouble generating speed. And there is actually a super popular design that incorporates all of those elements, which looked something like this.
Sorry guys, I forgot to include some important information here. The one I built is based off of a design I saw from a police baton that was used back in the 50s and 60s by my brother-in-law's grandfather who worked NYPD at that time.
I did my best to recreate it. This was leather. The full construction was rubber, which is pretty heavy. It came out to actually be more or less the exact same weight of one of these that I used. So it's again a more compact form, but the same mass. And you're probably noticing another important design element is we've got the cord on it. With the cord, you have a convenient way to isolate that movement into a small spot. So instead of now going by only what my wrist can do, you know, this cord's very flexible and I can get a lot more speed using this than with my wrist. No matter how limp-wristed I try going, how much I try whipping it, the cord is going to be better than the wrist. So it makes it pretty convenient that also if I ever need to, I can drop it, but there's some method of retention. If someone tries pulling on this, they're not getting it out. Much more similar to with an nunchaku. If I'm holding it like this and someone yanks on that, you know, I can have a much stronger grip than they can. Their hand's going to slide and I'm going to retain it. You get very much the same thing by using this cord to retain it. Now it's not going anywhere. And also I'm effectively increasing the length a little bit by having now the point of rotation is, or the pivoting point is no longer here, it's all the way here. And I can use my fingers on this to get some extra speed in it, to have a little bit more control. But I'm effectively lengthening the weapon. So if we look at these two designs, right, how to fix a small stick to be effective, which this design was around for well over 100 years. A popular, effective design when other options were available, and we see that the modifications done to a stick to make it effective are very similar to what's done to an nunchaku. So that leaves us now with these options here where we would have on the one hand this stick, which we're not really going to easily generate enough speed on the end to make it more effective than a punch. So we're just going to use it for thrusting, either as a punch or a hammer fist regularly, right? And we'll hold it in the middle to make it easier to retain, and it also provides a little bit more room for blocking, right? So not too bad, not too good, not too bad. On the other hand, we're going to have a slapjack type weapon, which is going to allow us to generate enough energy to deliver a knockout blow from a swing. This is going to be much stronger than a punch would be by itself. Also, we're going to have improved retention. So this is the real meat and potatoes. This is the side dish. And if we're going to go for this option over the nunchaku, well, does it come with any advantages? Obviously, we can't generate quite as much energy as we could with a nunchaku, but history tells us that this was enough. So what do we get in return for it? Well, freedom of movement. My hands can work completely independently while not having to worry about each other. That's a great advantage, especially for a beginner. It's just so much easier when you don't have to think about that. But does that come with a disadvantage as well? Yes, absolutely. If I am holding the nunchaku and I'm worrying about having to keep the distance between my hands the same, first we notice it's about shoulder width, and there's a little bit of movement I can do. I can bring them close, I can bring them that far, so it's not too terrible, but it is annoying, right? I have to learn to get used to that. And what's the advantage? Well, the advantage is, first off, I have the option to use this super big weapon, which is overpowered, from either hand. Either from here, I have this striking option, or this striking option. Okay, both of them work just fine. Another advantage is that I have my hands available. If I drop this, then I have a hand which can be used for grabbing, which is super convenient. If I have this weapon and I drop it, I lose it. Okay, so I can trade it one time, my stick for a hand, and that's it. But this one, I have that option of getting it back, but as it's dangling around here, it's there's a good chance I might lose it, or it could just be dangling around, getting in the way before I pick it up again. So, yeah. On the other hand, with this, okay, I want to drop on this side. I got this hand. Now I'm using it like this. At any time I can pick it up again. Okay, I want to use this hand. Got that. Now I've got this weapon. So it's really handy, being able to use your hands and a small weapon or a large weapon at the same time. Choose between those options. I think if you spend the time learning the nunchaku, that's a great advantage. The other thing you might have been wondering, though, is that with the slapjack, is that I was holding it kind of like this in one hand, as opposed to here. And on this hand, I'm using it like that. I mean, isn't this going to be much weaker, right? Weren't we just talking about how important it is to have the cord? Well, to illustrate that, let's look at something silly. Yeah, that's right, baby. This is a giant nunchaku. I don't know what to call this thing, really. This is just goofing around. It's oversized. Technically, I wouldn't call it a nunchaku because it's too big to comfortably use in one hand. So that would make it a two-sectional staff. But this isn't generally what two-section staffs would be like. You'd want it to be long on one end and then short like a nunchaku on the other. So it's kind of like a three-sectional staff is how I would think of it. Only it's in two sections instead. I don't think it's the best design, but it's good for illustrating something. Similar to a three-section staff, this by itself is really awkward and hard to use. Okay? Getting from side to side, I have all of this inertia acting across all of this length, exerting leverage and torque on my wrist, which makes it hard to get from side to side. But since it's connected to this, I can actually use this hand, and I just focus on using this as a pivoting point. So I stiff arm this, okay, and then I can swing it around like so. Well, that's actually a lot easier. And if I use them together, I can actually generate a lot more kinetic energy. I'm using this one section two-handed, basically, while doing this whipping movement to get a higher speed at the end. And then it acts as an anchor to help me to get back and forth from side to side, similar to what you would do with a sword with the weight in the pommel. It acts as an anchor, only it's a super anchor because I can exert force in whichever direction I want. And so I can start coming across, I can go around. It's great. You know, you can really move with this thing. But if I can do it with this, why not just have it with the 3-section staff, and it would be nimble and even better. So I don't think it's an effective design. I think it's a worse version of the 3-section staff. But back into a real normal nunchaku size. There are nunchakus that are bigger, and they can be very effective. That one is too big to be a nunchaku though. Here's my typical design though. And as I'm doing this, I'm using that same principle. So I can generate a similar speed in this tip by using both hands at the same time. So I'm still getting this flexible thing. It's actually going to be a little bit stronger than just the slapjack would, since I'm getting 2 hands in instead of just 1. The other thing is that I can hit where my hands are with an nunchaku. So if I'm trying to block, for instance, a stick coming in, okay, I can open my hand and hit with this stick, supported by my hand, exactly there. So I basically just kind of push my way through like that. This is the normal way of blocking with a stick. But I can't do that if it's one-handed and very small. There's very little room here to block something that would hurt my hands. And if I open it, then I'm going to lose my weapon. So those are the advantages of an nunchaku over the combination. Generally, I think it outweighs. I would rather have the nunchaku than the 2 small weapons. But to each his own. Every advantage comes with a disadvantage. So, anyways, I just find it amusing that when sticks were used a lot more than they are now, police were choosing options which incorporated this flexible element purposely, both to make it more comfortable to use and to help generate extra energy and to improve retention, which are features of a nunchaku. And it all is going against the arguments that Shad is making for the rigid stick. Even if they didn't know that the nunchaku existed at the time, they're not saying, well, let's try to make it. It's just they're following an evolution which leads towards a similar result. And obviously these cords, the lanyards, they're used not just for a really small one like this, the slapjacks. It was also used for the larger batons. They also, they're a little bit higher up and you come down, but it helps break up that grip and help it to be more loose and have better retention than you would have just gripping it solid. Anyway, so cool stuff. Real weapon was used, but not necessarily better than a nunchaku. So if you have never held a nunchaku before and you're afraid you don't know how to use it effectively, but you have an assailant coming your way, don't cut it in half. Carefully untie it, remove one section, retie it, tell him he can go again. Then you'll have a slapjack type weapon together with, I guess, a giant kubaton that you can use for striking without damaging your knuckles and concentrating the force. And you'll also have this weapon which is capable of delivering knockout blows from a swing. But if you know how to use a nunchaku, stick with that. It'll hit harder and you have a lot more options which haven't been discussed as much. I want to get into that soon.